All right, we're wrapping up our journey through the book of Judges with its final story. And I have to warn you, it is by far the most disturbing. This isn't just some ancient account. It's the book's final, desperate warning about what happens when a society completely and totally loses its moral compass. We're about to dive into the deep-seated decay that had taken hold of ancient Israel.
You need to burn this phrase into your mind. It shows up 4 times in these last chapters, and it's the absolute key to everything. The author is basically screaming at us, hey, everything you're about to witness, all the horror, all the chaos, it's all happening because there's a total vacuum of godly leadership. This is the book's central argument, setting the stage for a society in an absolute freefall.
So, the book of Judges isn't just a collection of random stories. No, it's carefully showing us a society trapped in this downward cycle. With every new story, the people get further from God, and their leaders get more and more corrupt. This story, this is rock bottom. This is where the nation finally just turns on itself.
Our story kicks off with these 4 people. Now, for the original audience, seeing a Levite from Ephraim paired with a woman from Bethlehem, that would have set off immediate alarm bells. See, this exact same setup appeared in an earlier story about religious corruption, so it's a huge hint from the author that things are about to get very, very dark.
So, as night is falling, the group is near a city called Jebus, which, by the way, we know today as Jerusalem. The servant says, hey, let's just stay here for the night. But the Levite refuses. He calls it a city of foreigners and insists they push on to Gibeah, an Israelite city. Why? Because he thinks they'll be safer among their own people. Oh, the irony. This single decision is what tragically seals their fate.
So they get to Gibeah, an Israelite town, and guess what happens? Nobody offers them a place to stay. It's a massive breach of hospitality and a really chilling sign about the character of this town. An old man does finally invite them in, but that brief moment of safety, well, it's about to be shattered.
And, yep, that safety is gone. The men of the city, who the text calls worthless fellows, and that term is always a red flag for extreme wickedness in this book, they surround the house. They start pounding on the door, and they have a truly terrifying demand for the old man who let them in.
So the men are screaming, "Bring out the man who came to your house so that we may know him." Now, the Hebrew word for know here is debated. It can just mean get acquainted with. But you have to look at the host's reaction. He's horrified. He calls their plan a wicked and vile thing, which strongly suggests this was a demand for a violent sexual assault, not a friendly hello.
And the host response just shows you how completely upside down their morality is. In a horrible echo of the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, he actually offers the mob his own virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine instead. I mean, can you believe that? To him, protecting his male guest was more important than protecting the women under his own roof. It's just a shocking display of how twisted everything had become.
But ultimately, it's the Levite himself, the very man who should have been her protector, who grabs his concubine and just pushes her out the door to the mob. She is horribly abused all night, and when he opens the door in the morning, he finds her collapsed on the threshold. And his first words to her body are a cold, "Get up, let's go." No grief, no horror, just inconvenience.
What happens next is, without question, one of the most gruesome things you will ever read in the Bible. The Levite takes her body home, but instead of mourning, he takes a knife and dismembers her into 12 pieces. Then he sends one piece to each of the 12 tribes of Israel. He's turning his personal tragedy and his own crime into this visceral, shocking call for a national war of revenge.
And you know what? His absolutely horrific tactic works. The tribes of Israel are completely outraged and they gather together for war. But their target isn't just the criminals in Gibeah. Nope, it's the entire tribe of Benjamin for protecting them. A single awful crime has now spiraled into a full-blown civil war.
And just look at the scale of this thing. This isn't a small skirmish. We're talking about an alliance of 400,000 Israelite soldiers getting ready to fight against the 26,700 men of Benjamin. It is literally the entire nation pitted against one of its own tribes.
Now, with those numbers, you'd think this would be over fast, right? Wrong. In a shocking turn of events, even with God's permission to attack, the massive Israelite army gets defeated on day 1. So they attack again on day 2, and they are defeated again, losing tens of thousands of men. It's only on the 3rd day, when they finally use an ambush, that they manage to overwhelm the Benjaminites.
The result is an absolute bloodbath. Over 25,000 Benjaminite soldiers are killed, almost the entire army. But the Israelite alliance doesn't stop there. They sweep through Benjamin's territory, burning their towns and killing everyone, men, women, children, and even livestock. They unleashed the same kind of holy war tactics on their own brothers that they were supposed to use on the Canaanites. It's a horrifying irony.
And then, after all the slaughter, this sudden wave of regret just washes over the victorious tribes. They start weeping before God, realizing with horror what they've done. They've nearly wiped an entire tribe completely out of Israel. The supposed cure for the initial crime has become a catastrophic disease all on its own.
And their solution to this problem? Well, it is just as morally bankrupt and violent as everything that came before it. First, they find a town, Jabesh Gilead, that didn't join the war. So they massacre its people and take 400 virgins to give to the Benjaminites. When that's not enough women, they tell the rest of the Benjaminite men to go hide and literally kidnap 200 young women who are dancing at a religious festival. They solve violence with more violence and mass abduction. It's just insane.
And with that brutal, twisted solution, the war is over. The survivors of Benjamin have wives, and the Bible just says that every man went home. It sounds like things are all wrapped up, like everything's back to normal. But the author of Judges refuses to let the story end there.
You really have to ask yourself, right? After all this, the civil war, the massacres, the kidnappings, was anything really solved? Did all that bloodshed actually fix the original problem? The answer is a clear and resounding no. The cycle of violence just created thousands more victims and left the nation even more corrupt than before.
And here it is, the book's final, damning conclusion. It's the very last verse. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. That is the ultimate diagnosis of the problem. Without a righteous king, without a moral compass anchored to God, the entire nation collapsed into chaos, where every single person, from the Levite to the tribal leaders, just did whatever they wanted based on their own selfish, violent impulses. It's a stark, terrifying warning of what happens when any society completely loses its way.